When we talk about AI in universities, it's so easy to get lost in all the tech hype, right? But today we're going to push past that. We're going to look at AI not just as a new tool, but as a complex social force, something that really demands a sociological lens to even begin to understand what's happening to the modern academy.
And this quote right here, this is our jumping off point. It frames AI exactly where we need it to be, as a sociocultural phenomenon. This moves our whole conversation away from just what the tech can do and towards the role it plays in shaping the entire social fabric of the university.
So to really get a handle on this, we're going to use a key concept, the socio-technical system. This idea forces us to see that AI isn't some outside force acting on the university. No, it's deeply tangled up in it, with all the existing hierarchies, the labor conditions, and the power dynamics that were already there. Which brings us to the core question of this entire explainer. How is AI actually changing the very pillars of the university? We're talking about how knowledge is created, how power is distributed, and, crucially, how inequality is being reproduced.
Okay, so first things first, we have to talk about the utopian vision. The big promise being sold is that AI will be this amazing democratizing agent, a technological solution for problems that have plagued education for decades. The question is, can it actually deliver?
And what makes this quote so powerful is who it's from. This isn't a tech evangelist or a university president. It's from Mohammed Fusainig, a grad student who used AI to cope with aphasia caused by migraines. His personal story really grounds this whole argument about equity in a lived experience. So this hopeful vision branches out in a few key ways. You've got personalized learning that aims to close achievement gaps. Some models are seeing huge gains. You've got better accessibility for students with disabilities. You have tools that can help multilingual learners, basically an extra teacher in the room. And for us researchers, the promise of speeding up our work. It paints a really compelling picture. But as you know, for every promise, there's a peril. The flip side of this utopian view is pretty dystopian. The danger is the rise of what we can call algorithmic governance, a new kind of control that has some really serious implications for surveillance and inequality on campus. 42%. Just let that sink in. That's how much higher the false alarm rate is for Black students in so-called early warning systems. This isn't just a glitch. This is a mechanism in action. It's historical bias encoded into an algorithm that doesn't just reflect inequality. It actively makes it worse by flagging the very students who are already marginalized.
And beyond just biased outputs, there's the feeling of being watched. This finding, from research actually led by students, puts a number on that chilling effect. 6 in 10 students feel they have to self-censor. That's a direct threat to what a university is supposed to be, a place for open and sometimes risky intellectual exploration.
So when you put these two things side by side, you see the core conflict. The exact same impulse, personalization, can either lead to tailored support for a student, or it can lead to predictive labeling. The tech itself is neutral. It's how the institution decides to use it that determines whether it's a tool for empowerment or just a digital version of a scarlet letter.
And these individual dangers, they start to add up to bigger systemic risks. You have inequality getting worse because of biased algorithms. You have the beginnings of a campus surveillance state. You have academic labor being devalued through algorithmic management. And you have a new digital divide, not just based on who has a laptop, but who have access to the best AI.
Okay, so how are faculty and their institutions actually responding to all this? This is where we shift our focus a bit to the level of organizations and professions to see how these big tensions are playing out on the ground. And this is pretty cool. It's a bit meta. We're looking at an IRB proposal for research on faculty. We're using the tools of sociology to study ourselves, basically. And the data that came out of this study reveals some really critical fault lines within the academy. So check this out. The data shows a pretty stark divide. Full-time professors are using AI way more than adjuncts and lecturers. And this isn't about personal choice. It's a direct reflection of labor conditions. Having the time, security, and resources to innovate is a privilege. It's a classic example of professional status shaping who gets to adopt new technology. This brings us straight to the question of governance.
And right now, there are two competing models. On one hand, you have the top-down corporate approach, rules handed down from the administration. On the other, you have a faculty-led model, these points to consider, which prioritize professional judgment and context over one-size-fits-all mandates. So when you put all of this together, the promise versus the peril, the divides between faculty, the fights over governance, it's more than just an interesting academic puzzle. It's really a clear mandate for us, as sociologists, to get involved.
And what does that mandate look like? Well, we can break it down into 4 key roles. It starts with critical analysis, doing what we do best. But then it moves into actually helping develop policy, innovating our own teaching, and finally advocating for the students and academic workers who are most vulnerable to all this disruption.
And this brings us right back to where we started, but with a much deeper appreciation for this statement. AI is not just a tool, it's a socio-technical system. And weaving it into the university forces us to rethink the very concepts at the heart of our discipline: knowledge, power, labor, and identity. Ultimately, we're left with more questions than answers. As we step into this new world where knowledge itself is co-created with machines, it leaves us with a huge sociological question that should drive the next wave of research. In this new arrangement, whose ways of knowing are being elevated and coded into the system? And whose are being pushed even farther to the margin?